Casey Viator makes bodybuilding history by being the youngest person to ever win the Mr. America title. All the details of the 1971 AAU Mr. America contest coming up next on Bodybuilding History.
I will be forever the myth.
You're the king of kings,
There's always a pecking order. The little packers never mess with the big packers. So I'm a rooster, and he's a chicken, so to speak.
On this episode of Bodybuilding History, I'm going to talk about the 1971 AAU Mr. America contest, a contest that is very significant in bodybuilding history because Casey Viator, who won the contest, did it at only 19 years old, and he became the youngest person to ever win the Mr. America contest, a record that has stood the test of time. The 1971 AAU Mr. America contest took place on Saturday, June 12, 1971, at Central High School in York, Pennsylvania. York, Pennsylvania, of course, was the home of York Barbell, which was owned by Bob Hoffman. The AAU Mr. America that year was held along with the AAU Senior National Weightlifting Championships, which took place in York from June 11th to June 13th. A record 39 competitors signed up to compete in the Mr. America in 1971, but only 33 ended up showing up at the show itself. Ironically, this was also the 33rd year that the AAU Mr. America was held, making it one of the longest running competitions in the country. So as I mentioned, the remarkable Casey Viator was the overall winner of the 1971 AAU Mr. America. At only 19 years old, Casey was the youngest winner of the AAU Mr. America in the long history of that event. Casey had won the Teenage Mr. America and the AAU Mr. USA a year ago, and he won the Junior Mr. America only 1 month before this contest. At last year's Mr. America contest in 1970, Casey finished a very strong third place behind Chris Dickerson and Ken Waller. In addition to taking first place at the 1971 AAU Mr. America, Casey also won the coveted Most Muscular trophy, and he won 4 out of the 5 body part awards. Casey scored a commanding 377 points to take first place. Second place in the contest went to massive Pete Grimkowski from Rochester, New York, with 350 points. Pete won the Mr. Eastern America contest a year ago, and he was that year's Junior Mr. USA winner. But he was a relative newcomer on the national scene, and this was his first time competing in the Mr. America contest. At 5'10" and weighing 232 pounds, Pete was the biggest guy in the contest with his wide shoulders and massive size. Third place went to Bill St. John, who was competing in his 6th Mr. America contest. Bill was actually tied for second place with Pete Grimkowski, but he ended up in third after the judges did the tiebreaker. This was the highest placing Bill ever took at the Mr. America contest because he took 4th place the last 2 years. Bill was very muscular and thick with incredible abdominal development, and he also took 2nd place at the AAU Mr. USA that year. Ed Corney, who was the current Mr. California winner, took 4th place at the 1971 Mr. America. 4th place was a big jump from last year when he only took 11th place at the AAU Mr. America. This would be Ed's last try at the AAU Mr. America, though, because that summer he made the switch over to the IFBB, and he won the IFBB Mr. USA that summer. Of course, Ed would go on to win the IFBB Mr. America and Mr. Universe just the next year in 1972. And Ed would also go on to make history by being on the cover of the book Pumping Iron, which covered the 1972 IFBB Mr. Universe in Baghdad, Iraq. Carl Smith was 1 point behind Corney to take 5th place at the 1971 Mr. America. Carl won the Collegiate Mr. America and the Junior Mr. USA a year ago, and this was his first try at the Mr. America title. Annabelle Lopez took 6th place at the Mr. America, the same place he got 1 year earlier. Annabelle was the current AAU Mr. East Coast champion, and he also won the short class at the AAU Mr. World that year. Charles Amato dropped from 5th place to 7th place at this year's Mr. America. Charles also won the Mr. Pacific Coast contest in 1971, and he was in 2nd place at the Junior Mr. America, which took place 1 month before this contest. Joe Teat from New Jersey was in 8th place at this year's Mr. America contest. Joe moved up from 13th place last year to make the top 10 this year, and he's a former Mr. New Jersey winner from 1969. Bob Gallucci was in 9th place. Bob is a former Teenage Mr. America winner, a title he won 2 years earlier. And Bob also won the Mr. Atlantic Coast and Mr. Eastern USA in 1970. He took 4th place at the Junior Mr. USA that year, and this was Bob's first try at the Mr. America contest. Bob would go on years later to win the Natural Mr. America contest, and Bob was adamantly against the use of steroids, and he was one of the first natural bodybuilders to compete during that time. 10th place is very notable because it was Mike Mentzer. Mike would go on to become one of the most popular bodybuilders competing in the 1970s. Mike was only 19 years old this year, and he ended up in 10th place at the Mr. America contest. He also took 2nd place at the Teenage Mr. America contest that year. And Mike had won the Mr. Pennsylvania contest 1 year earlier. It's interesting to note that Mike was the same age as Casey Viator, and he became friends with Casey at this contest, and he also got to meet Arthur Jones. It was after meeting Casey and Arthur at this contest that Mike really began to reevaluate how he trained, and he started using less sets and training with more intensity. And this is a training philosophy he followed for the rest of his life. Eventually, Mike went on to create the heavy-duty training system, which was based on the Nautilus principles that Arthur Jones began using. In the most muscular category of that year's Mr. America, Casey Viator was the clear winner. Mike Dayton, who only ended up taking 11th place in the Mr. America that year, took 2nd place in the most muscular man. 3rd place went to Bill St. John. Anthony Pace, who only took 20th place in the contest, ended up in 4th place. And Pete Gromkowski, who took 2nd place at the Mr. America that year, ended up only in 5th at the most muscular man category. The body part awards, Casey Viator really cleaned up. Casey won 4 out of the 5 trophies. He won best chest, best back, best legs, and best arms. It's also interesting to note that Mike Mentzer was 2nd to Casey in the best legs and best arms category. And Charles Amato, who was in 7th place, won the best abs award again. I believe this was the 2nd year in a row that Charles Amato won that title because he had really outstanding abdominals. I also have to mention Ken Waller. Ken was in 2nd place at the Mr. America 1 year earlier in 1970 to Chris Dickerson. So Ken was the heavy favorite going into this contest along with Casey. But unfortunately, Ken was suspended and was not allowed to compete in the Mr. America that year. Ken was featured in an ad featuring exercise equipment that appeared in Life magazine last October. The AAU rules clearly state that amateur athletes cannot receive any money for endorsing a product in order to be eligible to compete in the AAU organization. Ken Waller actually showed up at the contest to plead his case. Ken told the AAU officials that he was not paid for the ad and that he had no idea the ad was going to appear in the magazine. Unfortunately for Ken, the majority of the judges did not believe him, and he was voted out of the contest by a 5-2 vote. This is a shame because Ken had been involved in the AAU for many years, and he was slowly working his way up the ladder, and he was the favorite to win this year after taking 2nd the year before. So after being suspended, Ken never competed in the AAU again. He went over to the IFBB that year, and he won the IFBB Mr. America. And then in September, Ken traveled to London, and he won the NABA Mr. Universe title. He won the amateur title overall, beating out Chris Dickerson, who won the short class, and Albert Beckles, who won the medium class. Then after that Mr. Universe win, Ken continued to compete in the IFBB. He won the IFBB Mr. World in 1973, and then he won the IFBB Mr. Universe in 1975. It's also interesting that after winning this contest, Casey Viator didn't compete again for many years. Casey did not go over to London to compete in the NABA Mr. Universe as most of the AAU Mr. America winners did. And it's interesting to speculate how he would have done in that NABA Mr. Universe contest against Chris Dickerson, who had beaten him the year before, and also against Ken Waller. Casey was very highly regarded after his win at the AAU Mr. America as one of the most impressive physiques in the world. Many people were even wondering if Casey could beat Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's how impressive he looked at that time. But after this contest, Casey got away from bodybuilding, and he did not return to bodybuilding competition until 1978, 7 years later. He competed first in the NABA Mr. Universe, and then in 1979, he decided to start competing in the IFBB. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bodybuilding History. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more episodes of Bodybuilding History. And check out the Bodybuilding Legends podcast on your favorite streaming service, and go to bodybuildinglegendshow.com to listen to all of our previous episodes of the podcast. This is John Hansen for another episode of Bodybuilding History. Take care.